So I've just arrived here. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm not even actually sure what neighborhood in Brooklyn I'm in. I'm here to see Maimonides Hospital. This is what's been told to me to be the epicenter, the new epicenter. The epicenter is changing. It was Queens the other day. Now it's Brooklyn, Maimonides Hospital. People who've been watching the show will remember that the CBD salesman who recognized me from across the street, from what sounded like behind me, and didn't know my name or the name of the show. He said he lives here in this neighborhood near Maimonides Hospital, which we're going to approach in a moment. And he's being kept awake all night by sirens. Now, I wanted people to see this neighborhood a little bit. People who aren't familiar with New York City, we've said before, there's 5 boroughs. There's Manhattan, there's Brooklyn, there's Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx. And Brooklyn and Queens are more similar to one another than either of them are to Manhattan. You can see we don't have the kind of skyscrapers that we have around Manhattan. It's more of a residential neighborhood. This particular neighborhood is a very Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. Lots of Hasidic Jewish people live here. And for people who aren't familiar with that, I guess, sect of Judaism, it's a very religious, kind of closed culture. They generally marry within, the group. There's not a lot of mixing, and so therefore we've got some kind of like genetic similarities. I'm just looking at the gas station over there. It looks like gas is about $2.30 a gallon. So our friends in Texas and elsewhere who are enjoying those low gas prices, thanks to Mr. Putin, I don't think we're having the same, boy, that's super overexposed. We're not having the same kind of thing here in New York. So gas is, sort of staying high for now. But I wanted to come over here to Maimonides to check out what's going on, because we've heard that is overrun, like the hospital in Elmhurst, Queens there. Now, Fox just put out a story saying that New York State had a huge stockpile of ventilators specifically for some kind of pandemic that could happen. Now there we see some containers, but I think those are not for dead bodies. They're next to Ari's Fruitland. And people should also note that one of the biggest Jewish holidays is coming up. It's Passover. Some malicious social engineers last year doubted that I might be involved in a Passover Seder. They are so ignorant, they thought that Jewish people go to church. And ignorance is fine. It's the absence of knowledge. We can educate people to things. Jewish people don't go to church unless they're joining friends of theirs. So here's an ambulance. Now you'll notice that does not say FDNY. That does not say Maimonides. I didn't get a chance to see what it said, but it had some Hebrew writing on it. There's a lot of private ambulance companies that cater to the very specific religious needs of the very religious community around here. I mean, just as we walk around, we can see there's a big concentration of Hasidic Jewish people. We see young children with the payas, that's the long uncut hair coming down from the sides. I'm not that well educated in the ways of religion, be it Judaism, Christianity, or whatever, but my understanding is that the payas remain on these young men because they symbolize not destroying the body. The Jewish religion forbids tattoos and piercings and things like this, so it's symbolic of not destroying the body. Even cutting the hair is considered desecration of the body. So this whole plan that Mark Levine was talking about yesterday of burying people in the park and then, sort of temporarily and then digging them up, that's a crazy idea that I don't think was intended to do anything other than incite fear and panic and all the things. Have you been kept up by sirens at night in the neighborhood here?
Everybody does.
But always, right? Or just for coronavirus?
Always.
Always, because it's New York and there's sirens all the time.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, man.
The hospital's here and the hospital's here.
Right, so but it's pretty normal for sirens to blare all night, right?
Not on like Shabbos and stuff like that,
because the most of the neighborhood is inside and
Inside and everything is. They don't do nothing on Saturday, you know, and Friday and Shabbos.
right. And the neighborhood's
Quiet.
really heavily populated by Hasidic Jewish people, right?
Yes. Then there's children. They fall down. They're playing.
There's an ambulance right there. It doesn't have the lights going. Do you feel like this is the epicenter of coronavirus over here?
Yes.
Why do you think that? Can I have you on camera? Is that all right? Do you mind?
Yeah.
So it's a cluster, but I mean, what makes you feel like we're in the epicenter here?
Because there's a lot of people that congregate.
But are they sick? Have you seen a lot of sick people?
Yes.
How do you know they're sick?
My two neighbors, just one passed away, and
From coronavirus.
a week later, today they took the husband.
But they
And
both had
8th
coronavirus?
Avenue's here. That's a highly populated area. You
Did
know,
they both have coronavirus, these neighbors who died?
Pretty sure that's what they had. I don't think it's the flu.
Any other ailments? Were they old and sick?
80
They were.
and 85.
80 and 85.
My
And they had.
husband just went to the hospital today.
You went to the hospital today.
But this is like a congested area.
Right.
It's Borough Park.
Borough Park, Brooklyn.
Borough Park is always congested.
Right. All right. Well, listen. Thanks.
Especially 13th Avenue, 15th Avenue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, like during the weekdays, you can't even go down them avenues
Right.
for business or,
And so it's totally empty now, right?
now because it's holiday, Passover.
Passover's
It's
coming.
tomorrow.
Right.
So it'll be pretty quiet.
Right. How long you lived in this neighborhood?
25 years.
Wow. You don't celebrate Passover, I presume?
No, I'm Catholic.
I got it. Well, thanks for your time, man. Be well.
You too.
Take care.
You too. Be well too.
So there we go. We got a neighbor telling us that, hearing sirens in this neighborhood, not at all unusual. I don't have my my whole sound setup with me here because this was a pretty long subway ride to get over here. That might have been actually the longest subway ride I've ever taken. There are some nice things about. I don't know if people know this, but New York has some elevated subway trains, and I didn't want to, start streaming on the train because I didn't know where it goes underground and above ground. People might be able to see the Brooklyn Bridge through that, whatever that is that we're looking at there. But yeah, so wanted to ride the subway over here, ask some people on the ground what they think. The news reports that people here are being kept up. That guy who's lived in the neighborhood for 25 years, he seems to think that it's nothing strange at all to be kept up by sirens. That would be what I would think. Normally in New York City, which Brooklyn is part of, there's sirens all the time. People all around breaking their legs and stuff and, getting hit by cars and getting in bicycle accidents and getting stabbed and shot and whatever. And you can see there's a lot of Jewish businesses around here. That guy attributes a slowdown in the whole entire neighborhood to just being, Friday, Shabbos, it was what he was talking about there. And of course, with Passover coming, it's for a neighborhood like this, it's kind of like the night before Christmas. Everybody's getting their big meals ready. A lot of activity going on, but not so much now. So the thing that's the real question is, what is going on here in Brooklyn that causes Maimonides Hospital, which is right in front of me now, to be this new epicenter of the pandemic? We're in the epicenter of the epicenter. I mean, if you're in England or Australia watching 60 Minutes, reading the New York Times, looking at the Daily Mail, re-reporting some of the crap that goes out in the New York Times, you're going to think it's just chaos over here and the world is ready to end. So here we can see this area is blocked off. I do see a refrigerator truck, or what appears to be a refrigerator truck down there. Can people see that? Let's see if we can zoom in a bit. It's not too much of a problem to stand in the middle of a street in New York these days because there's nobody around here. I don't know, maybe people can look at this video and determine if that said environmental protection on it. Those trucks are NYC environmental protection, but maybe this segment of video will be useful for determining if that's where we saw those guys, loading a body into the trucks over there. Very unprofessional, very disrespectful of the dead. if that's what they were doing. Still have no confirmation on that. And then there are a couple of vehicles here in front of the Emergency Adult and Pediatric Trauma Center. Now, to be fair, it does not seem like coronavirus patients would come into the trauma center. But again, I would think if the hospital is overrun, all the standard kind of policies and practices would be adapted to deal with the crush. We can see here MESA SCIM. So this is Emergency Operations Command Center. This is dedicated in everlasting memory to a giant. I don't know who Mr. Shlomo is, but this is some kind of private medical company. We see there's a Maimonides ambulance right there. I can hear a siren. See an Instacare ambulance. These are going to be, you know, I don't know exactly how this relationship between city ambulances, hospital ambulances, private ambulance companies, I don't know how all that works, but there seems to be very little activity here. Now, a lot of people are telling me that, you know, coronavirus patients aren't going to take an ambulance to the hospital, and that's fine, that's reasonable, that may be true, but then why is Bill de Blasio asking for 250 more ambulances if we don't need more? And if they're all sitting around, why do we need more? So here's a Maimonides ambulance showing up, Emergency Services Medical Center. Somebody told me that here's another Instacare ambulance. Oh, they just turned the lights on the second they drove up here. So I don't know. We don't want to invade anybody's privacy, but this does seem like where they would be driving up with ambulances to let people into the emergency room. Perhaps there's someone there. We got this tent here. Don't know what's going on with the tent. Could be testing, could be, you know, I don't know. We got an ambulance over there, the door open. I originally had planned to do an interview today with Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell. There's an ambulance over there with its lights on driving up the street. Had planned on doing an interview with Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell. A lot of people have seen Dr. Sidell on the internet. He did a video earlier in the week, or perhaps last week, where, you know, he told us that this is a disease he's never seen before. The lung problems that he's seeing are not characteristic of a pneumonia type flu, or, you know, the types of, I guess, deterioration that he'd be used to seeing in those cases. You know, a lot of people immediately come out and say, whoa, this guy's not a doctor. People have said that Colleen Smith is not a doctor. I've checked the New York State medical, you know, doctors license database. Both Colleen Smith and Cameron Kyle-Sidell are medical doctors specialized in emergency medicine. They are both current. Their licenses are active. They are licensed in New York State. I don't know, did anybody come out of that ambulance? It seems like they just drove up and sat there. I didn't see anybody come out. Perhaps we missed it when I was just over there. But yeah, people are saying they wouldn't be using the ambulances to load in coronavirus patients. I guess they would be arriving on foot or by taxi or something. And I'm not denying that there are coronavirus patients inside here. It just seems to most people that logic would dictate, if there was a pandemic of sufficient gravity that we needed to shut down the economy, that there'd be activity around things like this tent, the entrance to this hospital. Here's another ambulance. I mean, I would expect them to be arriving one after the next, sort of pulling up here and, you know, filling the place up with patients. Have you guys been standing here outside the hospital for a while? No. Did you expect to see more activity here? No? Okay. So that's fine. A lot of people don't want to talk about anything. Let's see. What are people saying in the comments? So, right. So I was going to have this interview with Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell. He said some interesting things in the video that he put onto YouTube. It's interesting to note that he's just started his YouTube channel, and that video has got 345,000 views. That's a lot of views. It's pretty difficult, in my experience, to get that many views, even when you have several thousand subscribers and you're talking about topics of great interest and trending issues. I mean, these are sort of the types of things that I'm talking about all the time. I've had people like David Icke on the show. We've had Judge Janine on the show. I'm doing regular shows with Charles Ortel, and definitely personalities that people are very interested in hearing from and seeing. And I haven't had a video go to 345,000 views. Doesn't mean that Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell cannot do that, but it does seem to be anomalous. So he says that it seems like these patients are deprived of oxygen, that they seem like they've come from the top of a mountain, or they're on an airplane that gets depressurized. I thought that condition was called hypoxia. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about medical stuff. He used some other term. It's escaping me right now, but this is potentially important information. If we've got a medical doctor who's saying that, his hands-on experience here in the hospital is educating him that there's a medical paradigm that we're following that's false, seems like somebody that should be listened to. However, I was surprised that something happened between yesterday and today that caused Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell to decide to not conduct the interview. Obviously, he's very busy. He's here in the hospital tending to patients, so that's not surprising. There's a number of reasons why he might choose to not do the interview. That looks like a guy carrying some supplies inside. I don't know, there doesn't seem to be any urgency surrounding these ambulances, so if there's somebody very sick in there, I would expect them to kind of take that person out and bring them into the hospital. But the interesting thing that came out of my conversation with Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell is that he actually knows Dr. Colleen Smith. There's another ambulance without the lights on and not stopping it. So Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell, he knows Dr. Colleen Smith. That's also not really anomalous for two emergency medicine doctors in New York to know each other. I would not be surprised by that piece of information at all. What I am surprised by is that some doctors, like Colleen Smith, like Cameron Kyle-Sidell, have chosen, sort of their own volition, to come out on social media and make these public comments. They're not official spokespeople of the hospital. They're not making these videos in front of a podium that says Maimonides Medical Center. They are not listed as the media contacts for the hospital. And they're sort of making these statements that are their own opinions. And on both cases of Dr. Smith and Dr. Kyle-Sidell, they've said that they don't care if they lose their jobs. And that's interesting. I mean, that's noble. They're trying to do the right thing irrespective of the impact on them. But, losing their job is one thing. What about losing their medical license? Then we're down a functional doctor, and that would seem to be not in the interest of public health. So most doctors that I know, they like to do things by the rules, by the guidelines, by the tested, practiced principles, because, first of all, they don't deal in guesses, they don't deal in hunches, they deal in statistics, they deal in, tested outcomes and reliable, repeatable procedures. Okay, we see a gurney there, and it's empty. There's nobody on it. They rely on these procedures, and when it comes to things having to do with hospitals and rules, doctors that I know generally like to stick to those too, because if you come out in public and make a statement that's your own position, not the position of the hospital, and somebody acts on that, does something or doesn't do something, and then they have some kind of result, people can sue. And most doctors that I've spoken to, some of which I've known my whole entire life, some of which are members of my family, friends of my family, personal doctors that have been my own doctor. They all are open and willing to talk about facts and their experience and that kind of thing. But none of them want to go on the record for the very obvious reasons that they don't want someone in the public to come around and say, oh, you know, this doctor said this, so I acted in such and such a way. They definitely, the ones that are still practicing, don't want it to get back to their hospital that they made some sort of public statement that wasn't officially approved by the hospital, because if it goes against the policy of the hospital, it makes the hospital look bad. They could be saying something that's not officially tested or approved or whatever. I mean, so I see somebody over there, it looks like they're cleaning a gurney, and this is the type of thing that we would expect to see if there were a ton of ambulances coming in and out of here. We'd be disinfecting this stuff. So I don't know, maybe there's a pandemic going on right there. And I want everybody to be clear, I'm not denying that there is a virus. I'm not denying that there's a coronavirus, and I'm not denying that people are getting sick and dying. That guy just told us his neighbor died, 80-something, and then the husband died. I mean, obviously people are dying, and we've got doctors who are seeing patients who are convinced that they've got coronavirus, but then we're also hearing these stories where even the CDC is apparently telling them to say that people are dying of coronavirus. Now, wait a minute, I looked away. Did this ambulance just turn on the lights? I guess maybe that's a procedure if they're crossing a double yellow line or doing something that would otherwise be a moving violation. Maybe they have to turn on their ambulance lights. So there's more ambulance activity here than we've seen at other hospitals for sure. But I mean, it still just seems like a lot of people standing around chatting. It doesn't seem like urgency. Here we've got drinks coming out. Is that sodas, coffee? I don't know. So the interview with Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell is not going to be happening today. And when I asked him if he's ever participated in a simulation with his associate, his colleague, Dr. Colleen Smith, that was a question that he didn't want to answer. I also want to let everybody know that the ICU nurse that I was speaking to last week, and then again, see, that was an interesting case. That was a guy, came to me, said he's been a long-time viewer of Crowdsource the Truth. I mean, I don't know. I suppose that's possible, maybe. So he says, yeah, there's nothing going on at our very large Midwest hospital. And then a week later, he calls me back, uh-oh, it's ramping up. Okay, so he comes on the show, he gives me an interview. A lot of people weren't very satisfied with his interview. They felt that he was not answering questions in a way that caused people to believe that he was a nurse. I think he is. The issue that I have is that when we got to a certain point in the conversation, I told him, look, some people weren't really believing what you said, and I suggested that perhaps it was time that he put me in touch with the official media contact for the hospital. I won't reveal who he is, I won't reveal that we've spoken, but I'd like to check some of these things with someone who can speak in an official capacity on behalf of the hospital. And he was evasive. He said things that were not answers to the questions that I was asking. I asked him if he could put me in touch with the official media contact, the official spokesperson for the hospital, and he said there's going to be a lot of deaths next week. And I responded to that, put me in touch with the official media contact for the hospital, and he said something about being able to see it in his crystal ball. So that conversation quickly went from someone who I was taking seriously to someone who I now presume to have been attempting to socially engineer us. Tell us something, and then look, to me, he didn't say I would do it, but I'm just nervous about losing my job, because also that doesn't make sense either. Anybody working in that hospital who knows who that guy is going to recognize his voice, right? So if he's worried about revealing his identity, I offered on the first interview to mask his voice, and he said there was no need. So I don't understand why somebody like that, who I would not have revealed his identity to the hospital, I just wanted to call the hospital and ask the same sort of questions I was asking him to get an official response, and he's refused to do that. People will remember that I've been in communication with, was her name Aida? I forget her first name, Altia, something like that, Butler, who was presented to me as the official media spokesperson for Elmhurst Hospital. When I asked her a bunch of questions by telephone, she then told me that she didn't want to answer them on the telephone and that I should submit the questions. There's another ambulance. That I should submit these questions via email, which I did. And that was 4 days ago. Those questions have not been answered. That ambulance just pulled in. Oh, sorry, it's turning around the corner. Let's see what's around the corner. Anyway, Ms. Butler didn't respond to the emailed questions, and when I called her 48 hours after emailing, she confirmed that she had received them, but said that I needed to speak to Chris Miller. Now, I don't understand why she couldn't have just forwarded those email questions to Chris Miller and have him answer them, but I did that when she told me to forward them. I think that was Friday. And then I called Chris Miller's office several times. There was no answer. I called again today several times, left a voicemail, no answer, no response to the email. We're 4 days now. The questions I'm asking are things like, what's the hospital's position on doctors speaking to the press without their approval? What's the status of Dr. Smith's COVID positive test? Is she still seeing patients, or are staff members who test positive for COVID-19 put on leave and in isolation? I asked them, what's the story with Dr. Smith's status as a simulation expert, and what sort of simulation thing. I'll publish the questions. I may even publish the phone calls with some of these people. It depends. If people are interested in hearing this stuff, I think people seem to be interested in hearing these phone calls where I question social engineers. I don't know if these people are social engineers. I start off with legitimate questions, and if I don't get satisfactory answers, then we start to break them down and figure out who's lying. So now we've got an ambulance over here. The back is open. Hospitals, they bring people in ambulances. I guess they've made the determination that nobody can go to the hospital unless they have coronavirus. So that's interesting if anybody's sick with anything else. Looks like somebody's coming out of that ambulance. Oh, there's a whole other tent on this side, so perhaps I was on the wrong side. All right, so here we go. Forgot my wrist strap, so I can't look at the comments too easily. Well, again, it looks like boxes of stuff coming out of that ambulance. I don't see a person coming out of there. Let's get over there and see what we got going on. Borough Park, Brooklyn. We're at Maimonides Medical Center. Is that what the guy said? Borough Park? I think that's the ambulance. Okay, so this is another one of these hot Zola ambulances, and they're unloading boxes of equipment. There's no person in there. That's food or supplies or something. Excuse me, do you work for the ambulance company?
Me?
This ambulance here?
No.
You just in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Or are you taking pictures?
Yeah.
What have you seen here at the hospital?
What I've seen?
Yeah, what have you seen?
What I've seen? Oh, it was just a few minutes.
Just a few minutes? Have you seen a lot of people who are suffering from coronavirus?
Not yet, no.
How do you know?
How I know?
Yeah.
It's pretty quiet at the moment.
And
At the emergency room, at the trial.
Uh-huh. Are you kept awake by sirens in this neighborhood?
I hear it a lot, yeah.
For coronavirus or always?
Now especially.
Yeah, there's more lately?
Sure.
Don't hear any right now.
No, it got quieter.
The pandemic
Few days, thank God,
is
yeah.
calming down, you think? Let me see if I can speak to this woman. She looks like a doctor. Thanks. There's another ambulance sitting over here. You gotta be careful. I don't want to, approach people in a way that's going to make them definitely not want to talk to me. People have been giving me a lot of input as to how I should or should not approach people. Looks like we got some press here. I agree with that guy. It seems relatively calm. We're not seeing a ton of activity around this tent. I guess this might be the temporary morgue. We've heard about all these temporary morgues. I mean, again, I want people to recognize that the existence of a temporary morgue does not mean that the hospital's normal morgue is full. Here we have a siren. Ambulance approaching, trying to get a car out of the way. Here, let's see if we can grab the comments while we're waiting. There's an EMT. I'm going to talk to those guys. They haven't been too fond of speaking to me lately. What stupid questions? Well, the real Jesus, what would you like to hear me ask? Jewish mafia. I don't know about that. This is just a very Hasidic neighborhood. Let's see if we can speak to these guys. Excuse me, can I talk to you guys for a second? Has this hospital been overrun with coronavirus patients?
I think all New York hospitals have been.
Yeah? What makes you think that?
Call volumes?
Has the call volume been substantially higher? How long have you been an EMT?
3 years.
3 years. And would you say you're having twice as many calls this year as last year? This time?
I would say so.
More than twice as many?
Twice is about right.
So, I mean, does that seem like a pandemic, or maybe a lot of people are watching the news and calling you guys because they're nervous?
Might just be a mixture of both.
And when you're in there, is it a crisis going on? Is it overrun with hundreds of people that the hospital can't handle?
It's definitely, they're very limited on resources, I'll tell you that much.
So why don't they drive some of these patients to other hospitals in Manhattan that seem far less overrun? The mayor just asked for 250 additional ambulances, but everywhere I go, I see ambulances. This ambulance that you guys are running, it was just sitting here.
That I cannot answer. I have no idea.
So you don't work for FDNY, but it says EMS Paramedic City of New York. So you guys work for Maimonides.
We are under the fire department system.
How does this ambulance system work? It's very confusing. There's FDNY, there's hospitals, there's private ambulances.
It's a mixture of just a bunch of companies. Oh, yeah. All right, well, we gotta go.
Thanks. Okay. So there we go. It's a mixture. We're having a tough time finding out how the ambulance system in New York City works. But, I mean, again, I just say if an EMT driver came around 21st Century 3D when I was finishing a 3D job, I wouldn't have 5 minutes to sit there and talk to him and explain what's going on. I would just say, listen, you got to come back another time. I can't talk to you right now. He wants us to applaud. Got to get a handheld scanner and listen to police, fire, ambulance. No, I don't think I have to do that. Sounds Mossad. Come on there, gooby goo. How the hell? That's a stupid thing to say. Programmed by the official narrative. Well, let's be fair. I mean, these guys are people. They're watching the news, and just like everybody gets socially engineered by the news. Now, that ambulance is driving away at a very slow pace. You didn't hear them kick up the lights and rush off to some emergency thing. So some people are saying that people with coronavirus aren't taking ambulances to the hospital, that they're going to walk in, they're going to take taxis, they're going to do stuff like that. Other people are saying I'm a dope because coronavirus victims are inside the hospital, not outside the hospital. But I think a lot of people agree that there just seems like there would be more activity around these hospitals. Particularly, this is the one that the CBD salesman told me, the guy can't sleep. I mean, I haven't heard so many sirens right now. What time is it? Is it 6 o'clock, 6:30? Are more people getting sick at night? Chris Cuomo would tell us the beast comes at night. Looks like we got a nurse right here. Are you a nurse in Maimonides? Yeah. So is it overrun in there? Is it hellish? Apocalyptic?
You could ask them. It is apocalyptic.
Are you a doctor? Not a doctor? What do you do in the hospital?
I don't know English.
Don't speak English. Oh, that's useful for working in the hospital. I don't know. That was an odd response to laugh at the notion that it might be a... You work in Maimonides? Can I talk to you for a second?
No, I'm going back now. Sorry.
Is it crazy in there? Is it hellish, apocalyptic, pandemic? Careful.
I guess not as bad as the other day.
What was going on the other day?
Well, listen, I don't work in the ED, the emergency room, have all the action. If you want some real action, you got to go by the ED.
Uh-huh. So it was a pandemic the other day, but today it's a little better.
Well, you know, it's been crazy.
All right. But it's always crazy. It's a hospital. People getting sick and dying, right?
Right, so that's why you hear accidents. It's a pandemic, right? Just a little extra.
Little extra. Little extra crazy for the pandemic.
Right.
So you're a doctor. Are you an ER doctor? Do you know this guy, Kyle-Sidell?
I don't really have a comment. Who are you?
I'm Jason Goodman, Crowdsource the Truth. Kyle-Sidell, he put out a video where he was saying that this is some kind of disease that he's never seen before. He doesn't know what it's all about. Seemed like important information.
I don't really have any comment for you. If you want to comment from the hospital, you can go inside and check with the press office.
Where do I get to the press office?
You can go check with security in the front office.
I mean, isn't it dangerous for me to go into a hospital that's overrun with
I
coronavirus?
don't know why you're walking around without a mask on anyway. You're not really properly socially distancing and not being particularly careful.
But this is more than 6 feet, and you're a doctor. You just advised me to go into a hospital to ask a question.
You can go ask.
Wouldn't it be smarter to call?
Okay, you can call.
Okay, seems like bad advice from a doctor. Thanks. So, I don't know. They don't want to talk. Walking around, leisurely getting coffee. Pandemic was apparently yesterday. I missed it. I mean, does anybody else think that that was stupid advice to go walk inside and ask them? I mean, what's a mask going to do for me? Doesn't want to talk. All right, that's fine. So the action is over here by the emergency area. I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult. This all started because I just felt like something about this wasn't right. I'm not saying there's no virus. You know, there are definite idiots on the internet who claim to be doctors. And I was very disappointed in Mike Adams, the health ranger, someone who I've met personally and had held in high regard. Mike Adams runs Brighteon, which is an alternative to YouTube. And he conducted an interview with Paul Cottrell. Have people seen my phone conversation with Dr. Paul Cottrell on Crowdsource the Truth 2? If you're a Crowdsource the Truth YouTube subscriber, I hope you'll search on YouTube for Crowdsource the Truth 2 and become a subscriber there as well. I have a couple of additional videos on there, including this phone call with Dr. Paul Cottrell in which he reveals himself to be an absolute fool, doesn't seem to know anything about medicine, and then Mike Adams, the health ranger, somebody who I really respect, or I contacted him and I let him know, all right, there's somebody coming out of there on the gurney. I'm not going to point the camera at them. Obviously, there are sick people at the hospital. So one person has come out of the white tent on a gurney and is going into the hospital. And there does appear to be another gurney at the entrance of the hospital. So we have 2 patients here. And we don't have to point the camera at them, preserve their privacy on their way into the hospital. But yeah, I alerted Mike Adams that he should be careful who he endorses and what information he shares, because it just doesn't seem like Dr. Paul Cottrell is somebody who knows anything about much of anything. He's demonstrated extreme stupidity, in my opinion. And go over there, Peter Riley says. Where? I mean, I'm going to go in there and they're going to tell me to leave. So yes, I agree, Richard. What a joke. I'd rather call. Screening first makes sense, Jerry. So perhaps someone arrives in an ambulance, goes into that tent, gets screened for coronavirus, and if they have it, something happens, and if they don't have it, something else happens. I don't really know. I can't say. But that would make sense. So Steve is telling us that the USA will be on lockdown until July. Topo Chico says no media today. Pandemic closed. Yeah, the pandemic is taking a hiatus today. I used to like Mike Adams, Kelly tells us, but then he started pushing a false narrative. I mean, I have to say, people should know when they watch that interview on Brighteon between Mike Adams and Dr. Paul Cottrell, I alerted Mike Adams that Paul Cottrell had engaged in that really inexcusable public display of stupidity, and that he should consider that. And he just totally ignored my advice and went ahead and treated Paul Cottrell like he was a medical doctor or something. Let's see if this guy will talk to me. Can I talk to you for a quick second? Are you an ER doc? Do you know Cameron Kyle-Sidell? Is it an intense pandemic inside the hospital right now? Is there any information you can share with people who are worried? At all? No. All right. Thanks. So that's typically the way most medical professionals want to act. They don't want to speak because they're not authorized to speak on behalf of the hospital. So it becomes anomalous when we have these doctors who come out on the internet and go on Twitter and make public statements. There's several doctors now that I've spoken to either on the phone or through Twitter. I forget that other guy's name. I got to put this all together in one compilation where people will be able to just ask themselves, what's up? You know, I understand how that doctor just behaved. I wasn't trying to be rude. I hope I wasn't trying to make him uncomfortable. He doesn't want to talk. Now, the dope who told me to go inside the hospital and if there is a virus in there, increase my risk of exposure to it, that was advice from a doctor that seems like it would spread a virus. Why didn't he tell me to call the media office? Why wasn't the first thing he said, you should have a mask on if you're going to be around here? Why isn't the whole area closed off around the hospital if there's such a dangerous, contagious pandemic? Why is anyone not in need of emergency services allowed to go anywhere near the hospital? It seems like there are some really simple steps that could be taken to control this spread of a virus if anyone with a brain were managing an actual viral pandemic. Instead, we're seeing orders for ambulances that don't seem to be needed. We're seeing Navy boats showing up to hold 20 non-coronavirus victims and then immediately introduce a crony in there and then ask the president if we can bring coronavirus victims on board the boat and act like that's some kind of victory. The point I'm trying to make is not that there isn't a virus. I think there is. I think that there might be multiple strains of a virus. The one interesting thing that Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell said to me was that we don't know what's going on with this virus, and that I agree with. That's interesting. So finding out more about it is definitely something that we should do. Now, the other thing that we should be doing is perhaps studying these neighborhoods where allegedly these pandemics are happening, because is there something in this community that is, that looks like a Con Edison truck down there with the flashers on. Is there something going on in this community? You know, we've got this very unique and kind of, I guess is homologous the word, where they're all sort of, you know, Hasidic Jews, and they do certain things that other groups don't do. They congregate in synagogues, they stay at home with their families on weekends, maybe in a way that other cultures don't. I don't know. I'm just saying, is that something to study? Why is there a concentration of cases in this neighborhood, concentration of cases in Elmhurst, Queens? This looks like somebody working at the hospital, walking over there kind of leisurely perhaps for her shift. Excuse me, miss, do you work at the hospital? Can I ask you just a quick question? Has there been a huge pandemic over there at the hospital? Has it been really crazy?
Yeah, it has.
Well, you're walking much faster now than you were a second ago. Can I just ask you a couple questions? You don't want to talk to me? You changed your pace really immediately. You could just say you don't want to talk. See, everybody's acting strangely. I don't think I asked her anything weird. She stopped. She started to take out the headphones. It almost seems like somebody has told them all what to say or what not to say. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, I think that's all we're going to learn here in, is it Borough Park, Brooklyn? We got Maimonides Medical Center back there. It's the pandemic epicenter du jour. Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell, I wish you would have spoken to me. I have a sinking feeling that you might be trying to put a message out that is not necessarily 100% what it seems. You have my phone number, doctor. Call me if you'd like to speak. Have a good evening, everybody. Don't forget to get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. There is a ton of sponsor exclusive content on there. Gigantic library that's constantly growing. It's going to grow some more tonight. We got another episode of More Pain with Mike Moore, editor-in-chief of TruePundit.com. And also, you know, as YouTube clamps down, because they don't want you to see facts, they want you to see information as they see it. It's very important that people become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. Crowdsource the Truth. Help keep the show going. I'm about to get on the train here, so take it easy, everybody.